I came home from deployment 3 days early to surprise my wife, but the surprise was on me. I found her in our bedroom with my stepfather, the same man who'd made my childhood hell. As I watched him move above her, hearing her moan his name the way she used to moan mine, I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was the perfect opportunity for the revenge I'd been planning since I was 12 years old. Hey, this is Storyline Universe, where we share real and realistic stories with unexpected twists. If you enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe and give it a like. My name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old. I've been active duty Marine Corps for 7 years, currently stationed at Camp Pendleton in California. The woman who destroyed everything was my wife of 3 years, Rebecca. And the man who made it possible was Frank, my stepfather, the monster who'd been ruining lives since I was 12. Let me start with Frank. My real father died when I was 10, and my mother remarried 2 years later to this smooth-talking construction foreman who seemed like the perfect replacement dad. Frank was 42 then, built like a linebacker, with the kind of commanding presence that made people listen when he spoke. My mother was completely charmed by him. What she didn't see was what happened when she wasn't around. Frank had a thing for control, for breaking people down and building them back up in his image. With me, it started small, criticizing my grades, my friends, the way I threw a football. Then it escalated. He'd corner me in the garage, press me against the workbench, and whisper threats about what would happen if I ever disappointed him or my mother. "You're weak, boy," he'd hiss, his breath hot against my ear, "just like your dead daddy. But I'm going to make you strong, whether you like it or not." The psychological abuse went on for years. He never hit me. Frank was too smart for that. Instead, he'd find ways to humiliate me, to make me feel worthless, to ensure I knew who was in charge. When I finally left for the Marines at 18, I swore I'd never let him have that kind of power over me again. But I also swore that someday, somehow, I'd make him pay. Rebecca and I met during my second deployment at a USO event in San Diego. She was 25, working as a nurse at the base hospital, with long auburn hair and the kind of smile that made you forget whatever you were worried about. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in the challenges of military life. We dated for 8 months before I proposed, and she said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, just close family and friends. Frank walked my mother down the aisle, playing the role of the devoted stepfather, charming everyone with his stories and his easy laugh. I watched him flirt with Rebecca during the reception, saw how his eyes lingered on her when he thought no one was looking. Even then, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Frank always went after what he wanted, and he especially enjoyed taking things that belonged to me. For the first 2 years of our marriage, everything seemed perfect. Rebecca and I bought a small house near the base. She transferred to a civilian hospital nearby, and we talked about starting a family after my next deployment. Frank and my mother lived about an hour away, close enough for occasional visits, but far enough that I didn't have to see him often. Then came my third deployment, 8 months in Afghanistan. Rebecca seemed nervous about me leaving, more so than usual. "I just worry about being alone for so long," she said the night before I left. "What if something happens? What if I need help?" "You've got friends on base," I reminded her. "And my mom's not far if you need family." "What about Frank? Would it be okay if he checked on me sometimes, just to make sure everything's okay with the house?" I should have said no. Every instinct I had screamed against it. But Rebecca looked so worried, so vulnerable, that I found myself nodding. "Just be careful around him," I said. "What do you mean?" I couldn't explain about my childhood, about the psychological games Frank played. Rebecca thought he was just my mother's husband, a little rough around the edges but fundamentally harmless. "Just don't let him overstep," I said finally. The first month of deployment was routine. Rebecca and I video called every few days, texted constantly, sent photos back and forth. She seemed happy, busy with work and her book club and yoga classes. Then I started noticing changes. She was less available for our scheduled calls, often claiming she was tired or had made other plans. When we did talk, she seemed distracted, frequently looking off camera or checking her phone. Her text messages became shorter, less affectionate. "Everything okay at home?" I asked during one call. "Of course," she said quickly, "just busy with work. Oh, and Frank's been great about checking on things. He fixed the garbage disposal last week and helped me move some furniture." That familiar knot tightened in my stomach. How often is he coming by? Not often. Just when I need help with something. But there was something in her tone, a defensiveness, that made me suspicious. I started paying closer attention to our conversations, looking for clues. Rebecca mentioned Frank more and more frequently. How helpful he was, how nice it was to have someone to rely on, how he'd brought her dinner when she was working late shifts. Same. 3 months into deployment, during a video call, I noticed Rebecca was wearing a necklace I'd never seen before, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant. "That's pretty," I said. "When did you get it?" She touched it reflexively, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Oh, this? I've had it for a while. I don't remember seeing it before I left. I just haven't worn it much." Another lie. I knew every piece of jewelry Rebecca owned. The breaking point came during my 5th month overseas. I called Rebecca at our usual time, but she didn't answer. I tried again an hour later. Nothing. Finally, around midnight her time, she called back. "Sorry, baby," she said, but her voice was breathless, like she'd been running. "I was in the shower." "For 3 hours?" I fell asleep after. Long day at work. But I could hear something in the background. The sound of a truck door slamming, an engine starting. Rebecca lived in a quiet residential neighborhood. There shouldn't have been any truck traffic at midnight. "Rebecca, is someone there?" "What? No, of course not. That's just the neighbors." The way she said it, too quick, too defensive, confirmed what I was already starting to suspect. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with figuring out what was happening at home. I started calling at random times, trying to catch Rebecca off guard. I paid attention to every detail in our video calls, the lighting in our bedroom, whether the bed looked slept in, if anything had been moved. Then I noticed the coffee cups. Rebecca drank tea, always had, but during one video call, I saw 2 coffee mugs in the sink behind her, one with lipstick marks, one without. "Since when do you drink coffee?" I asked casually. "Oh, I've been trying it lately, trying to cut back on caffeine." But coffee has more caffeine than tea. It was another lie, and we both knew it. I made a decision that night. I couldn't prove what was happening, but I could prepare for it. I contacted a buddy of mine who worked in private security and asked him to install some discreet cameras around my house while Rebecca was at work. "Just want to make sure everything's secure while I'm gone," I told him. The cameras were hidden, one in the living room clock, one in a picture frame in the bedroom, one in the kitchen smoke detector, motion activated, streaming to a secure server I could access from overseas. For 2 weeks, the footage was boring. Rebecca coming and going from work, watching TV, talking on the phone with friends. I started to think maybe I was paranoid, that the stress of deployment was making me see things that weren't there. Then Frank showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Rebecca should have been at work, but the bedroom camera showed her coming out of our bathroom wearing nothing but a towel, her hair wet from a shower. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open. "Rebecca?" Frank's voice called out. "Up here," she called back, and I heard something in her tone I'd never heard before. Excitement, anticipation. Frank appeared in the bedroom doorway. He was still built like a linebacker at 58, his graying hair slicked back, wearing jeans and a tight t-shirt that showed off his still impressive physique. Rebecca dropped her towel. I watched, frozen in horror and fascination, as my wife walked naked across our bedroom to embrace my stepfather. He grabbed her immediately, his hands roaming over her body possessively. "I've been thinking about you all morning," she whispered against his neck. "Show me," he growled, pushing her back toward our bed. What followed was the most devastating hour of my life. I watched Frank undress slowly, deliberately, while Rebecca lay back on our bed with a look of pure hunger in her eyes. When he finally joined her, the sounds they made together, her gasps and moans, his deep groans of satisfaction, echoed through our bedroom like a twisted soundtrack to my marriage's destruction. The way she moved beneath him, arching her back and calling his name, was nothing like how she'd ever been with me. This wasn't duty or obligation. This was passion, raw and desperate. "I love how you feel inside me," she panted as he moved above her. "You're mine now," he replied, gripping her hips harder. "Say it." "I'm yours, Frank. Only yours." I turned off the feed before I could see any more. But I didn't delete it. Because watching my wife betray me with my childhood abuser had crystallized something in my mind. This wasn't just about adultery. This was about Frank taking something else that belonged to me, just like he had my entire childhood. And this time, I was going to take something back. I submitted a request for emergency leave, claiming a family emergency. Within 48 hours, I was on a plane back to California. I didn't tell Rebecca I was coming home. I landed at San Diego International on a Thursday morning and drove straight to our house. Rebecca's car was in the driveway, along with Frank's pickup truck. It was 10 a.m. on a weekday. She should have been at work. I parked down the street and used my phone to check the bedroom camera. They were there, of course. Frank was sitting on the edge of our bed, fully dressed, while Rebecca knelt between his legs, still in her scrubs from the hospital. Apparently, she'd been calling in sick to spend time with him. I gave them time to get started, then quietly let myself into the house through the back door. The sounds from upstairs were unmistakable. Rebecca's soft moans, Frank's heavy breathing, the rhythmic creaking of our bed. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and anticipation. The bedroom door was open. They were so lost in each other that they didn't hear me approach. Frank was on top of her now, moving with the same aggressive dominance I remembered from my childhood. Rebecca's legs were wrapped around his waist, her hands clawing at his back. "You feel so much better than he ever did," she was saying. "He was always weak," Frank replied, "just like his father." That's when I spoke. "Interesting perspective." They froze. Rebecca's eyes went wide with terror. Frank turned slowly, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw genuine fear in his face. "Marcus," Rebecca gasped, scrambling to cover herself. "You're supposed to be deployed. I know." I leaned against the doorframe, outwardly calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Emergency leave. Wanted to surprise you." Frank was climbing off my wife, reaching for his clothes with studied casualness. but I could see his hand shaking. "Son, this isn't what it looks like." "Don't." My voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't call me son, and don't lie to me. I know exactly what this is." Rebecca was crying now, clutching a sheet to her chest. "Marcus, please, I can explain." "No need. I've been watching for weeks." The color drained from both their faces. "The cameras you installed are excellent quality," I continued conversationally. "Motion activated, cloud storage, perfect resolution. I've got hours of footage." Frank was fully dressed now, trying to regain his composure. "Now listen here, boy." "No, Frank, you listen." I stepped into the room and both of them instinctively moved back. "For 16 years you've been taking things from me. My childhood, my sense of security, my confidence. And now you thought you'd take my wife too." "Marcus, it just happened," Rebecca sobbed. "We didn't plan it." "Bullshit." I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot from the cameras. Frank arriving at our house 6 weeks ago. Rebecca greeting him at the door in lingerie. This has been going on for months. Planned, deliberate, systematic. Frank was sweating now, his earlier bravado completely gone. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything that matters to you." I walked to our dresser and pulled out a manila envelope I'd prepared before leaving for deployment. Copies of emails between Rebecca and Frank, printed screenshots from the security cameras, a detailed timeline of their affair. "Rebecca, you have 24 hours to pack your things and leave. The house is in my name, the mortgage is mine, everything here belongs to me. You can take your personal belongings and that's it." "Marcus, please." "And Frank." I turned to my stepfather, the man who'd terrorized my childhood. "You're going to call my mother tonight and confess everything. Not just about Rebecca, about everything. The way you treated me as a kid, the psychological abuse, all of it." I have witnesses now. Rebecca here can confirm what kind of man you really are. She's seen your techniques up close." I smiled coldly. "My mother deserves to know who she's been married to." Frank's face had gone pale. "She'll leave me." "Probably. Just like you cost me my marriage." "Marcus, you can't." "I can, and I will, because unlike 12-year-old me, 28-year-old me isn't afraid of you anymore." I turned back to Rebecca, who was still crying on our bed. "The divorce papers will be filed Monday. I suggest you find a good lawyer." "What about the videos?" Frank asked quietly. "What about them?" "They're evidence of adultery, which will be very helpful in divorce proceedings. Rebecca signed a prenup, but infidelity voids most of the protections." I headed toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Frank? If you ever contact me, my mother, or anyone else in my family again, those videos find their way to your employer, your friends, and anyone else who might be interested in seeing what kind of man you really are." 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Rebecca got nothing. The prenup and evidence of adultery saw to that. She moved back in with her parents, lost her job at the hospital when word of the affair got out, and last I heard, she was working as a waitress in Nevada. Frank confessed everything to my mother that night, just like I'd demanded. She threw him out immediately and filed for divorce within the week. At 55, she had to start over completely, but she told me later it was the best decision she'd ever made. "I should have protected you better when you were young," she said through tears. "I had no idea what he was doing." "It's not your fault, Mom. He was good at hiding it." Frank lost everything. His marriage, his house, his reputation, his construction company, folded when word spread about the affair and his treatment of me as a child. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment, working odd jobs and drinking heavily. The best part? He knew I'd orchestrated his destruction, just like he'd orchestrated mine as a child. But unlike him, I'd done it with evidence and truth instead of manipulation and fear. I'm remarried now, to a woman who understands what loyalty means. We've been together for 2 years and she knows the whole story about Frank, about Rebecca, about the revenge. She says it shows strength, not weakness, to protect yourself from people who try to destroy you. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't installed those cameras, if I'd just trusted Rebecca and come home to find out about the affair some other way. Would I have been devastated? Probably. Would I have gotten my revenge on Frank? Unlikely. But the cameras gave me something invaluable: proof, evidence, the ability to control the narrative instead of being controlled by it. Frank taught me a valuable lesson when I was 12. The world is full of predators who will take whatever they can from you. What he didn't expect was that I'd learn to become a predator myself when necessary. The question that haunts me now isn't whether what I did was right or wrong. It's whether Frank ever realized that by breaking me down as a child, he was actually building the man who would eventually destroy him as an adult. Some lessons take years to learn, but when they finally pay off, the satisfaction is worth the wait. Every childhood monster eventually meets their match. Mine just happened to be me.